Hi guys, I'm Carrie Cates. I think I've now said that a couple times, but all good, now you know. I am a local film producer, production manager, line producer, production designer, as I'm sure a lot of these guys will fill you in. Here in Texas, we do everything on our films. So I do a lot of commercial work, but I also, well, that pays the bills, but then I work a lot in horror, which sucks my bank account dry. But I also do a horror podcast called the Scary Movie List Show, which is in its second season. We come up with a topic and then we talk ad nauseum about different films that fit within that topic. So I can fill time, which is why Elizabeth asked me here. But I'm going to let each one of my panelists here talk a little bit about themselves, introduce themselves, and what their latest project, what you might know them from, and we'll go from there.
So I'm Will Boothman. I'm a filmmaker from Fort Worth, Texas, and I'm the director of Ghost Trippers.
My name is J.J Perez, and I'm the producer, co-writer, and I acted in Ghost Trippers as well.
My name is Budro Partida. I am a local filmmaker as well, director, editor, producer. I don't have a film in this festival, but I'm known for a horror film known as Beware, and I'm currently working on a documentary called Bloody and Bruised, The Untold Story of the Back Room.
I'm Debra Gutjahr. I'm a local producer, television and film. Lately, I've been known for Loose Ends, which was directed by Schrader Thomas, my good friend, and Cheap Devils, which actually showed at this film festival last year. I've also done a couple features, and I have a podcast coming in 2023 that is about paranormal murder.
All right, so I want to start off, because this panel is all Texans, but also we're all horror folk. Let's talk a little bit about Texas, because we somehow landed here. Most of us had that moment probably where you're like, well, where do I go? What am I at LA? Do I stay here, or do I move here, or whatever? What brought you to Texas? Why are you here? And what do you like making films in Texas? Like, what's special about making films here?
I'll start. Yeah, I'm Texas born and raised. When I started my career, it was always a thought that I would.
I need to stop.
It was always a thought that I would move to LA or New York or something crazy. I was a single mom at a really young age, so that wasn't really in the cards for me. Texas is a difficult place to be a filmmaker, and I just had to figure out how to make it work.
Well, I'm originally from South Texas, and at the time, Austin and Central Texas was kind of seen as the place to go shoot, and because tax laws and all this stuff, and it's really filmmaker friendly. So that was, when I was a young guy, that was my goal. It was like, as long as you get to Austin, we'll figure it out. We'll make movies some way or another. So that was, and I've never left. So I've always just been here since, and it's a good place for networking as well. So
this is only my second project, so I haven't really done too much. But I am glad to live in Texas, because everything I've heard about Texas is that it's far better than going to LA, because LA, there's so many people trying to do the same thing you are. So everybody just either says no to you or charges you just so much money to film in California. Here, everybody's so welcoming when you ask them if you can film part of your movie there. Usually everybody's pretty welcoming, and they want to be part of it. So it's and plus Austin is growing, obviously, and lots of movie studios are moving here. Big production companies are moving here, so it's a plus living in the area.
The same thing. I was born here, and I don't really have too much to add to it. I mean, Texas has amazingly diverse landscapes, and the only downside is it really isn't the incentives here. But I mean, with the digital revolution of film, I really don't think that you need to go to any kind of hub. I mean, the internet can be your marketing tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what's cool about here, like you guys had kind of brought up, is like LA, everyone is against one another. Like, you're constantly dealing with those no's. Whereas here in Texas, like, we kind of band together. Like, a lot of you guys, I know people from your crews, we're all together. We're all like trying to lift each other up. And this industry is like really increasing because of that. So yeah, we get a lot more work, and it's growing really cool landscape for it.
It's very collaborative.
Yes.
For sure.
And incentives, they'll come back, but it's funny too because we complain about them, but I'd say 90% of the films I'm making are lower enough budget that they wouldn't have touched an incentive anyway. So
Right.
if anything, it's just beg, borrowing, and stealing a lot to get those films made. So all good. So I have one more question before I'm coming out to you guys for some questions. So I'm opening it up to the audience here in a moment. So start, if you haven't already. Well, again, my podcast is making lists. And so let's make a quick list. What was the movie that you watched? Like, it doesn't even have to be in horror, but like, what's the movie that you watched that you were like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go make movies.
I can answer that real quick.
Yeah.
Creepshow 1982 from George Romero. To this day is my favorite horror film of all time. I've seen it hundreds of times. I have it on VHS, DVD, European DVD, Blu-ray, special edition Blu-ray. I have the original theatrical poster in my office. I have the original comic book from the film. Like one of the, it's just one of those films that I just loved it, and I can pretty much quote it. And when you run into other horror fans that know it, they're like, "Oh, Creepshow!" Like my daughter has a Creepshow blanket, and it's just it's been a huge influence on me, and I love it. I never get tired of watching it.
Mine would be El Mariachi and Ed Wood, because those guys just went out and did it their own. And I was like, well, nothing held them back. What's holding me back?
So I wasn't alive in the 80s, but obviously the 80s has a big inspiration on me. But it wasn't an 80s film that inspired me to make horror films. It was actually a movie called Hatchet by Adam Green in 2007, which is an 80s throwback movie. But my mom would go and buy me a movie like every 2 weeks for, as like the chore money type deal. And I picked that movie because it had Robert Englund, Kane Hodder, and Tony Todd in it. And when I saw that movie and saw how like gory it was, but it was also like funny in certain parts, I was like, this is so awesome. I want to do something like this. I want to make films like this where it's just super gory and funny at the same time. Like, I absolutely love that, and that's been my inspiration ever since. I actually got to meet Adam Green, the director of that film, and he gave me inspiration for filmmaking when I chatted with him. And after that, a week later, I was writing my first film. So that's what got me started.
When I was like 18, I watched Snatch. And that film, I was like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. Like, that's so brilliant, the way that this story was told.
It's a great movie.
Great movie. But as a kid, and I always kind of draw back to this, Poltergeist. When I saw that film, that really drove my love for horror movies. That piqued my curiosity, and just like something that I think about to this day, like scenes in that movie, and I could watch that movie over and over again. So I guess that's the film that inspires me for the horror genre.
That is a great answer.
That's awesome.
Poltergeist is awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
I wish that as a child I would have watched horror. My parents very much were like, this is off limits. Like, you cannot go in that section of the VHS rental place, which made me want to go in there more. Like, I remember seeing very vividly, which is such a funny VHS cover to have in my brain because it has nothing to do with the movie, which is Dead Alive.
Yes.
It has the girl's mouth stretching open and like this thing coming out. It's not part of the movie at all. But I didn't get to see that until I was in college. And after that, I was like, oh, this is like pure anarchy. Like, I have to watch everything.
Girl,
that's
same.
there. So good.
Same deal. My parents left us alone in a hotel room for a few hours, and Poltergeist came on the TV, and they came in at the end, and we were all just like, me and my brother and sister sitting at the edge of the bed, just like captivated by this film. They're like, what are you watching? We're like, and I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever seen.
And kind of tying back into your Texas question,
Yes.
like for me, I remember as a kid when one of the neighbor kids had come around and he said, So there's this guy somewhere. He cut up people with a chainsaw, and he's for real. And he lives in a cell with a hole, and that's all. And you need to watch. They made a movie about him, and I remember watching it at 7 years old.
As a documentary.
Yeah. It's like it's a real true story, and that, I mean, to this day still I think is one of the most frightening films ever because of the fact that it looked like a documentary, and
It was filmed here.
it was filmed here.
Yeah.
You know, and
Viewing
actually,
experience.
yeah, it's like. It's so like you can go to the house, you can actually go to Round Rock where it was shot and Gonzales and all these other places. Like, man, you know, it's such a significant film that was done locally by local filmmakers, so which I think also kind of helped ties to the Central Texas horror feeling, you know.
Yeah,
Totally.
absolutely. And I love, like, I
That's
just
great.
went up to Philly earlier this year. I was working on a lesbian vampire movie, which should come out sometime next year. But when I was up there, I felt like, yeah, like you have to make films outside of LA because the locations become a character. And I think Texas becomes such a strong character in so many films that are made here, like Texas Chainsaw. You can't shoot that anywhere else. Like, that feels like a Texas film, and it's amazing.
The film that we did last year, Schrader and I, Loose Ends, we shot it in a house that was in Pflugerville, an old farmhouse. And I don't know if you've seen it, but it will be available on Anthem October 25th. But anyways, the house was a character in itself.
Yeah.
It was this old farmhouse, and it was the most beautiful setting to film something at. And like you said, to your point, and all of your points, you just can't get that anywhere. It has to be like it's like cornfields everywhere. It's like this old house in the, you know, middle of Pflugerville. Who even knew? And it was just like it's what made part of what made that film special.
Yeah, if your location isn't legit haunted, then what are you
Then
doing?
what are you doing?
All right, guys, so let's take a couple questions. If you got one, yep.
How do you find talent?
I'll start. The last audition, I hate rejection. I'm sure everybody does. So I hate auditions. The last audition I did was in 2016. And luckily with that film, A Touch Too Much, I went into film festivals, and that's where I actually met J.J, my producer. So I've been using the film festivals as the auditions. I'll watch a film. I'm like, hey, I like the style of this person. I can see them playing this kind of character. And if they also like the work that I've done, then that makes a connection. And luckily I haven't had to do an audition. I'm sure I will at some point. But one of the benefits of these film festivals is you get to network and you get to meet people whose work you like and form relationships that way.
Yeah, true. Then you know who the Scream Queens are, who's got the lungs.
Yes.
Great.
That was a great response. That was
How do you find your talent?
Well, I've been doing this for. I've been working in Texas film and television industry for my whole life, basically, and so I have really great connections with casting directors and casting agencies. So I just go through the normal resources. I always do open on. I love open auditions. Here's the thing. Going through casting directors and agencies is great, but holding open auditions is my favorite because you get to find the most amazing talent out of people that haven't even been recognized yet, or maybe this is just their first time, or maybe they haven't done it in a while, or maybe they're like a 5-year-old kid and you kickstart their career. So open auditions are my favorite, but just going through the normal casting.
That's always a cool part of the process, too, in that sometimes somebody will come forward and you're like, this is not what I thought that character would look like at all. And then they start and you're like, I can't imagine anyone else doing this part. So it's a cool experience for sure. Yeah.
I've been working in TV. My background's television production. I've been in TV production for almost 25 years now. So I have had a chance to build a lot of connections, build a big network. I joke a lot with my commercial clients, like I'm 2 phone calls away from anything. I had a client ask me for a goat for his commercial and then, 2 phone calls later, I made it happen. There was a goat in his commercial. So a lot of times now since I've kind of been established in the media here, at least in Central Texas, a lot of times even though it's an older way of doing it, but really word of mouth really I think it's still effective. A lot of people go, hey, Budro's looking for somebody that can get, stabbed in the face. And they're like, all of a sudden I get 3 emails within the hour, so it's still, I still think there's some merit to that. Granted, it's slower, but I think it kind of helps refine I guess the quality of auditions, to put it, in one way or another. So I still do that, but don't get me wrong, I still go to, Facebook groups and stuff like that. And, hey, I'm looking for a couple people to be killed in this music video. All right, I'm in, so, all right, so it's still about, I'm still very old school like that. But obviously take advantage of technology.
Yeah. And the Facebook groups, you're right. Like, we have a lot of very robust, like, actors groups and whatnot. I think there's like 10 of them that I post on every single time that there's a casting. We always want to cast a big net, and then we just narrow it down to who we see. So, yeah, good. Did that fully answer all of your burning? Or did you need more about how we sell this project? Like, how do you get these people to do the crazy? And what I've found is the more crazy it is, the more people really want to do it. Because, like, they've done plenty of the Shakespeare and junk in college, or, there's, like, opportunities for that. But, like, to be, like, in a bathtub getting slaughtered and blood everywhere.
Who doesn't want to do that?
That's a great piece for your reel.
I want to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
I've had many of people come up to me and said, "I want to be killed in your movie."
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Drunk at the bar, like, hey, buddy.
Pretty common.
Yeah. Which is a great compliment, by the way.
Yeah.
I really think score is very important. Music is so important to a movie.
John Hopkins, right? Like.
Yeah, it's like
Notoriously.
whenever we were editing our film, and then going from that to actually adding the score, it completely changes it. It's a whole nother movie. Like, sometimes when I'm watching a rough cut without the music, I'm like, oh God, is this bad? Like, there's something wrong with it. But then when the music's added, it's like, oh, this is awesome. This helps so much. It just it highlights everything and makes everything better, in my opinion. So, so for our score, I'm very blessed because I actually work for a popular cover band here in Texas. That's my main job. Filmmaking's always been my passion, but that doesn't pay the bills right now. So, so yeah, I work for a cover band, and they're all great musicians, and one of them was kind enough to score the film, and then they all got together and made a kind of pseudo band or pseudo name for their band and did a cover song for our film. They knew the original bass player of Ozzy, so we were able to get permission
Some
from the
great
bass
credit
player.
music.
Yeah, that's
So,
amazing. Cool story.
Yeah, but we're very blessed in that case. But again, music is very important to a film, and I think my favorite composer would be John Carpenter. I mean, obviously he's more mainstream, but I think that his scores are awesome in every one of his films, and that's what comes to mind right off the bat. So,
again, I'm not a horror guy, so my favorite composer is Ennio Morricone.
Yeah. So I mean,
it's very operatic, and when I think of movies I want to make them operatic. I also just came to the realization that I'm really less of a director and more like a museum curator, snatching up things and putting them into my movie. Just like I get actors and filmmakers from the festivals. I have not had a good experience making a movie and then trying to put the music in after. I would prefer to find the music beforehand. Just as J.J. was saying, he has a lot of music talent that he's connected to. So I just push this all off on him. But in terms of writing, directing, and editing, in my opinion, it's way better to have the music firsthand. Which again, my idols, Sergio Leone, he would play Ennio's music for the cast before they ever shot, so they knew the rhythm that they had to act to, and that's the process I like to work by.
you want to go?
Go ahead.
I've always kind of shared with with people that it's my job as a filmmaker to elicit an emotion from the viewer, and whether that be repulsion or laughter or whatever, and a big part of that is score, is music, and a lot of times I yes, I've tried to use source music, but a lot of times majority of the time, actually, I actually have a couple friends that are classically trained musicians. And because they're not, and it seems funny to go that route, but they're not horror people. They know how to emote emotion through their music. And if I go to them and say, I want you to help me make this scene feel like this, then they're not really paying attention too much to blood and gore and everything like that. They're saying, okay, from here to here, you want to feel suspense, and here you want the actual jump scare, and then from here you want the release. And what, it's a matter of me working with them to say, okay, what are we going to do to piece that together? And so a lot of times, I think a popular method of working is usually a temp track. Is if you're going that route, I do that sometimes. And but I go back old school again. I go Ennio, anything John Carpenter, stuff like that. Even old John Williams, I do that kind of stuff too. Tyler Bates, I also like him. It's a matter of, because I want to tell my composer, this is kind of what I'm going for, and so that gives him a better clue of, all right, cool, and I do have a lot of musician friends that I'm connected with as well. So depending on the project, there's some that I work with more than others, but there's some that I'm just like, hey, I want this to sound like Nine Inch Nails from 1995. And they're like, okay, we can do that, So it's really, for me, it's about the project, but it's also that feeling, the emotion, and, how do I create that dread with what I have to work with. And as far as what was your second question? The effects?
We'll come back to that.
We'll
make a second round on
Okay.
that. Yeah.
You're like ready for that one.
We're so ADD, but we're really excited about that question. So.
But to shadow what you said a little bit, having just a demo track, something to compare to, we did that on Loose Ends. Schrader put in the score from Gone Girl, and sent that to the composer and was like, I need something that is like this. And for that film in particular, the score is just so deep and intense that it really drives the film. The first feature that I did a million years ago with my husband, John Hale, that was before we were married, we found this guy on Craigslist who had just gotten out of college, and he was like, that was what he wanted to do, was score films. And he did Herlin Galvez, I still remember his name. He wanted to score, he offered to score a film for a ridiculous amount of money. It was so cheap. And he did such an incredible job, and it changed the film. It changed how that film registered, how moments registered. But also on that same point, sometimes as filmmakers, we do have to remember when to be silent. Because sometimes silence is the thing that makes the scene the most eerie.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I got.
Yeah, it's amazing that, so I'm in a great position where I've lived my life as a film producer, I guess, and I married a score composer.
Oh, amazing.
Lucky you.
Yeah. I just hand him whatever I want. And I'm like, can you do something with this? But what's cool about living with a score composer is that I see a lot of films pre-music and then post-music, and it's really interesting to understand and see that process and understand that it does feel like a Frankenstein situation where you're like, this is awful, and then it's like he takes a heart and he puts the heartbeat in, and then suddenly it's up and moving on its own, and it feels like something that's cohesive and together, and it's just a very beautiful part of the process. So when you find that score composer, gotta not let them go, but yeah, they're great. I obviously didn't let mine go. So let's go back around then. We've got a question about the special effects and practical effects, which, as we know as filmmakers, can be a big challenge. It is always, a little back step where we're like, should we just do this CGI? Should we do this in post? What are we doing? But let's talk purism. Let's talk actual practical effects.
Yeah, practical effects are something that I'm very familiar with. I did this film feature called Pickaxe, and it was just nothing but murders. Jeremy Simran, I produced that. Yeah. that film was a beast. And we literally had to tell Jeremy, like, okay, our nudity budget is, we have no more money in that budget for nudity. So
There's a lot.
you literally cannot ask a single other woman, like, hey, are you okay with nude? Because we can't. Like, we've spent every dime. But the same goes for, like, the gore effects. It was just, like, nonstop, like, almost, like, exaggerated Quentin Tarantino blood effects, which were great. And I love, and they are so fantastic, but they're so tricky to do.
You're selling this movie so hard. Like, we're all gonna go home and like.
It has like 2.5 on IMDb. It is like the epitome of like 80s cheese. That was the whole point, like throwback to like 80s horror movies with boobs and gore, and just it was fantastic in my opinion. But the thing is a film in my mind that always registers to me that like the effects in that film were so incredible that it just really like sparked a curiosity for me of like how far can you push special effects? And you can push them pretty far, but obviously, CGI helps a little bit, but on a low budget, the more you push the envelope, the cheesier it gets. That's my answer.
I actually own Pickaxe, so it's actually a great movie.
He has it on VHS.
Yeah.
He has
Jeremy's a good friend of mine. I know him very well. So,
I produced his movie.
Yeah. 98% of what I do is practical effects, and I deliberately set aside budget for that because I know that in the end, it actually, I'm happier with it. I'm a big fan of Tom Savini.
Yes.
And so he once said, and I still to this day hold this true, and I've actually told this to student filmmakers and people that are on a budget, what do I need to see to make me believe this is happening? And I've always run with that mantra of, okay, well, really, we just need to see this guy's head with the axe, and how do we shoot this? And with enough effects, we just need blood here, and then you just frame it around that, and then you can pull off the gag.
Yeah,
you
let
know.
their imaginations
So yeah, and it's really just what do I need to see to make this believe it's happening? I did a music video where we had a guy. We didn't tell him at the time, but we had a couple kills, and we had a practical effects where this one guy he was a podcaster, and he said, "Hey, come on out to the shoot. Why don't you be killed in this music video?" He's like, "Yeah, sure." And little did he know that a couple hours later he was going to be getting torn up, and we rip his guts out. And so, and it looks really great, and but a funny little tidbit about that is. Our BTS snapped a photo of him yelling and screaming and and I decided to put that on the poster, that face. And so now every time we get that music video gets accepted to a fest or runs wherever, hey, it's getting, and we slap his face and he goes, oh my God, there it is again. There's my face. I'm like, hey man, you wanted to be in the video. So
I guess I'm the release.
Yeah.
I haven't had a whole lot of experience with practical effects yet, but I would like to at some point because that's a huge inspiration. Tom Savini is amazing. You nailed it with The Thing. The Thing is one of the best '80s practical effect movies, and Hatchet, the movie that inspired me, is nothing but practical effects. And so I would love to do something like that one day. So we gotta work together, maybe. Yeah.
So I've always wanted to do a creature feature, and I haven't just because I didn't know how to. I have less experience than J.J. does with practical effects because he did in his first feature, Beneath. So that's something I'm really itching to do. I feel like I've got the other bases of filmmaking competently covered, hopefully. But right now, I'm this new horror fan. My biggest inspirations are my flavor of the month is Frank Henenlotter. He made his first movie, Basket Case, on $35,000 in 1982. That means $10,000 went to the film, so he had $25,000 to make a movie with. And if you watch it now, yeah, you're going to say that the monster's goofy looking. But I think that those could be fixed with free things like more creative lighting, putting things in the shadows, as Budro has said. What does the audience need to see? So that means clever editing. If he had taken a little more time to do those, I bet he could sell that movie to audiences today. I still really appreciate that film because this man made a monster movie on $35,000 in 1982, and it is still entertaining today.
Yeah, if you go back and watch those early horror films, the ones that were doing practical effects, and then you go back and watch things from like the early 2000s that were attempting to do the same things in CG, it always looks better on the older
Always.
stuff.
Yeah.
It just holds up so much better. So yeah, that's a great question.
I'm gonna say budget.
Good answer.
Number one. But also, if you're going for more of a psychological thrill, then you're taming down that gore and you're really making it more practical. You're making it more believable in the moment, which is hard to do on a low budget with big effects. So you have to make them smaller. Like what he was saying, you fill in the blanks with your mind. If you're going like straight slasher movie, then the more gore the better. That's the genre, right? You want to own it. You just want to do gore. But budget has a lot to do with that because practical effects, doing them right, is not cheap. You can do practical effects on the cheap, and they're gonna look cheap.
Mm-hmm.
You get what you pay for. But that's my response to that question.
I think I've always liked the mantra of less is more. So a lot of my projects it's not very intense or stuff like that. Or well, I take that back. It's more like I don't overly make it explicit like on purpose. It's more I don't have a lot of kills, but when I do, I go big, And a lot of even my smaller projects like music videos and stuff like that, I still treat music videos as 3, 4, 5 minute opportunities to flex my horror muscles. That the ones that are horror inspired, to tell a story with a beginning, middle, and end. And the beginning and middle may not be as scary or gory. But then in that third act of that music video, when we have all those kills, yeah, there's going to be lots of throats being fucking slashed. And there's going to be a lot of gore in there. And then, but it's just that whole, just for that one little bit, it's kind of, whoa. And the effects people, it's a very tireless, thankless job. And it's one of those things where if you get a good crew of effects people, it's a blessing. It's such a huge thing. And what's even better is when they all, when you treat them with respect and, you all work together and they're just as excited as you are to help you as the director to make this vision come to life on film. And it's a great thing. And so, that's where I'm at.